All right, guys, welcome back for another podcast. Here we go.
Welcome to the podcast.
Here we are.
We're just winging it today.
Yeah, a little bit.
It was a long couple weeks and long weekend.
Yeah.
Is it what day is it? Wednesday? Wednesday.
I think, yes.
I don't know which way is up, let alone what day it is.
Yeah,
We're I'm kind of looking at you today. We stepped into this little bit here, and we weren't really sure where we were gonna go, and just kind of shooting the breeze on things that have been going on in the last couple of weeks, and how it relates to all the stuff that we've been talking about, and now it's kind of just like freewheeling it. So if we kind of lose a train of thought, I promise it'll come back around
somewhere.
So bear with us. Yeah. But Carlo, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at the last couple of podcasts. I mean, well, first it was the press release, and then the couple of podcasts that came after that. Obviously I listen to them when I drive and that kind of stuff. And I think looking at how we have the creating accountability diagram kind of put together. Talking about the snitch loop, things like that, is I think, I guess what I get a lot of questions about, and, from either staff members, and I guess what we're not necessarily immune to within our organization as well, is just really like constant battling of the failure mindset. Mm-hmm. And again, failure mindset is just individuals who lack shared purpose and impede the success of the team. And I think what most people, when they start to think about a failure mindset, is it seems as if it would be a deliberate act. Mm-hmm. It seems as if it would be an open process. It seems as if it would be staring you right in the face, like just the actions that you have. Like you just think that there's someone who's constantly trying to sweep your legs out from under you. Mm-hmm. But that's not the case. It's almost exclusively subtle. Yeah. And it's in a lot of the way in which we carry ourselves. And I think one of the examples I actually had this weekend, I was talking to Molly, and I always say there's two ways you can say I don't care. So on one hand, when it's if we're running triage or patient care or something like that, and it's just like, how do you want to do this, and how do you want to do this act, or how do you want to do what process do you want to have, or what order do you want to do these cases in, or whatever. And on one hand, it's, well, I don't care. Well, on one hand, I don't care. It could be indifference, right? So it's like, well, all of this stuff needs to get done. I legitimately don't care what order it happens in.
I just need to go.
Yeah, we need to get it done. Yeah. And that kind of I don't care is, I think, part of the reason I enjoy working with Molly when she's running triage, and I think a lot of people do, is that for me, I'll be like, yeah, I agree. All of this stuff needs to get done, Molly. I don't care how we do this. Let's just get it. And then she just runs with it. She just goes. Mm-hmm. And it's never really, there's some things maybe occasionally that are off base, and it's like, well, let's just tweak this for next time or whatever. Mm-hmm. But the other kind of I don't care is not just indifference, but it's legitimately I don't care. I don't really care about what's happening here right now. I'm totally detached from what's happening in the organization or staff or patient care. I don't really care to be here. I don't want to be here. So if you're asking me how I want to do something around here, I don't care. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I don't, and that's where you start to look at the victim part or victim definition, at least in some capacity, is that it's individuals who are convinced that they're powerless and avoid taking responsibility for their actions. So if you're in a position where the I don't care individual is in a position of quote unquote power. So I think we need to be very loose in our definition of power, because certainly with our organization, as we focus really, really hard on toppling the totem pole, as it were. So for us, power can come many number of ways. It's more of just like a decision-making process, who's in charge of running triage, or who's in charge of making decisions on patient care, hospitalized patients, who gets what first. So, power can just be a matter of decision-making rather than authority, I guess is one way of putting it.
Yeah, you can only have one captain on the ship, basically.
Yeah. And that's, I think so. When I start to look at, I don't care, I think that's, so just kind of driving back to what I said a few minutes ago, is that the idea of failure mindset is it's really in kind of subtlety in how we talk. And if you have two different people of two different mindsets, is that if you have one person who is of a growth mindset, and they are told, well, I don't care. Well, the immediate reaction from someone with a growth mindset is, oh, I'm indifferent about how this happens. But on the other hand, if it's, you're tucking it to someone of a failure mindset, it's like, well, you just don't care, and I think, I don't know how I can necessarily relate this, but I think, one of the things that I get tagged on, especially from employees that choose to offboard themselves, is the idea of me being without compassion.
Yeah.
So it's, for me, I'm so committed to growth and so committed to really the success of the individual, really to the success of the team, is that I'm constantly pushing for performance and really trying to improve consistency, really trying to improve confidence. I would say those are probably the three areas that if you guys look at our star chart, those are really the three that I really push hard into, is performance, consistency, and confidence. Because competence and clarity kind of comes along with it, but I think those are kind of the three biggest ones to push. But I think it's pretty clear. I mean, I feel like most people within the veterinary industry, at least in some capacity, either got in it or stay in it because of compassion. Like, we're pretty much driven by that. And I think it's difficult to measure other people's compassion. So that's where, like, for us, like in our core values, we talk about trust, unity, respect, and accountability. We don't talk about compassion. We don't have a mission statement that says we're going to provide the most, compassionate and caring service. It's like, well, everyone shows that a little bit different. Everyone shows that in different ways. And I think that's where, when you look at people who are, victims who are looking for persecutors. Now, persecutors are individuals often blamed by a victim for suffering, things in that regard. So it's basically just the people but he's the one who's doing it. The company is doing this to me. The circumstances are doing this to me.
He who gets blamed.
Yes, he or she or it or whatever gets blamed. So again, I'm just trying to drive at some of the subtlety here, is that when we start to talk about failure mindset and we roll this back on how subtle this can be within the organization, within individuals, with how we carry ourselves. I don't care how this is done. Then it comes back into saying, like, all right, well, let's focus then on working all the way back from when there is an accountable event, when we start to talk about the fault tolerance. Is that then coming into saying, well, how do you get to failure mindset? Well, you get to it through division. So it's engaging in communication, which challenges purpose and shared well-being. So for us, it's the same thing. Like I said, that's why, like, when I get dinged on compassion, it's like, oh, he's not compassionate. Oh, he doesn't. It's like, well, that's just all like divisive talk. It's just ways in which that they're trying to divide the team and polarize the team, either for or against one person or another. And I think that's why, honestly, over the years, we pushed really hard to sell the idea of serve the patient, is having sort of this common purpose that we can rally around. And we do that all different ways. But I think because we all serve the patient in different ways, it can be really easy to then say, well, the way in which I serve the patient is the best way to serve the patient, and the way in which anyone else serves the patient is no longer the best because it's not the way that I would do it. So that's how we get institutionalized. That's how the university system gets the way it is. That's how the profession gets to the way that it is. And it completely impedes growth when we assume the way in which we are doing something is the only way to do it. And I think that's why our whole process, even from performance reviews all the way up to how we put in IV catheters, to how just triage is run. There's always opportunity for input on absolutely everything. Because I assume as an organization, we just don't have like perfection. It's impossible to obtain.
Correct.
And the other thing that's actually been really interesting, so we talk about the subtlety of the failure mindset. It's actually been really interesting to see the company grow now to near 50 employees. Like we're close. I think we're like high 40s. It's been really interesting to see like how, because I know way back, even actually at the inception of this podcast, we have significantly increased the number of staff that we've had, even just in the amount of time we're doing PAWCast. But it's been interesting to see, because we talk about foundation, we talk about, core values, we talk about some of these governing principles, to be like, no, this is actually what we have is very much replicable, and it can scale, it's scalable. To then see now coming into 50 employee or close to 50 employees, we'll probably, we'll be clear past that by the end of the year. Like there's no question about it. Is that it's interesting to actually see how these things scale. So how, when we had, say, 20 or less employees, it was actually really, really easy to keep a handle on culture, or at least easier. It's not like, see, the thing was, is we were growing culture at that time, so we didn't have perfect culture then, but it was easier to kind of have a handle on culture management.
You had more time for individual management.
Yeah, there you go. Yes.
There was more available resource to help individuals move through it.
Yeah.
Because you had to, because it was a growing idea.
Right. It was all of it.
Yeah. There was a lot of things that kind of happened simultaneously in that, where there was the idea that culture had to turn into something that was extremely effective to serve the patient. There was the development of tools at the same time, because it's like, well, we don't really know how to do this, so now we have to start to source all these ideas. And we have to experiment with them to try them out, adjust them, make that make sense. And that worked. The experiment phase worked a lot better in a smaller group because most of those people had been around for an extended period of time and were already on board with like what was happening from an ideas perspective. And then it's just about making it better. But it also just, communication is just simpler because there's just less hands to touch, basically. So, actually, at some point we'll have to actually have Janessa come up here to talk about experiment phase. Because that would play pretty heavily into this. I've been thinking about that a lot. But
her life.
Looking back on it, I don't feel bad, but I kind of do.
Not at all.
But it developed. The reason that I wanted to is because it turned into this, right?
Yeah.
Like, she was just a good case of like, here's what we have to do.
Yeah.
I don't really know where this is going to go, but we know that it has to go there because it will be better. Now that we have so many more people, especially those that are part-time, weekends only, that sort of, and it's been so damn busy with COVID overflow.
Yes.
It's just the resource of time, the one that you can't get back, becomes so sparse. And that's what you need to do this really, really well. So we have been kind of in the middle of a balancing act for the last, 6 months?
Yeah, at least. Yeah, and I mean, you throw survival mode on top of that.
Right.
So it's hard when you are already at the end of who you are from a survival mode standpoint. But again, that's why, like I said, it's not like I enjoy survival mode. I don't enjoy staff being overworked. I don't enjoy, any of that stuff. But when you do start to strip that away, it really does, in a very short amount of time, show you exactly who people are. And that's where I think when you look at failure mindset, growth mindset, like that I think is what gets uncovered much, much quicker, as far as, and like I said, a big part of it is coming back to the accountable event. It's just, you hit that fault tolerance, and it's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to engage in communication that challenges and divides, or are you going to provide the opportunity to improve performance and improve fulfillment? And it's like, that's it. And that's where I think, again, there's kind of this, actually even on the tri-core, it's what happens under stress. And it is a very, I don't want to say natural reaction, because it's kind of unnatural circumstances that put you into sort of survival mode. But it does really, again, I think we said this even during survival mode, it really makes you focus on what's important. Yeah,
for sure. Just going back to some of the details that would lend them, like when I would look at, from a hiring perspective, like some of the stuff that would say this person's generally going to behave this way from a tri-core's perspective, there are a couple of variables in there that actually give you a better understanding that a person is already in survival mode, or they might not realize it. And that's actually when that was the majority of what I did with my days, would be something that would lead to like some of the best conversations, because you would take a person, and that's kind of where I think we're headed in this, is you'd have somebody that would have almost no realization where their head was actually at, because it's so passive, because it's so subtle. and you'd point to these things and just say some of the right words where it's like, well, so like role awareness, which if we go back, long ago, there's an indicator that on there that tells me that somebody's really dissatisfied with their position in life, basically, which would lean towards they're going to act in their adaptive behavioral pattern more frequently because they're stressed out. And when you say like, how do you find yourself actually behaving like just day to day? Is it this or is it this? And then it's like, well, this is why. What's causing this displeasure? Like, what are you not convincing yourself of? And it would honestly, like, that variable. I was hesitant to focus on it because it did create, like, when that variable exists from a hiring perspective, somebody is a greater flight risk.
Sure.
So it is more from a stabilities perspective. In hiring, someone who doesn't have that will generally stick around longer on an average basis. However, if you can flip the person into what we're here is purpose and well-being, then they stick around even longer because they were, it's a positive growth thing. So it was a interesting thing that would point out the way that these people were thinking and not realizing it most of the time. I was that person a long time ago, the first time that I took it, and I thankfully was provided the self-awareness that I was doing it, and it seemed to repeat itself pretty easily.
And I think that's like, I guess the thing is, in taking that though, I mean, saying that, there's a little verbal cue or like you said, an indicator cue or something that kind of flip people's mindset. There's a lot that goes along with that though. Like there has to be an ability to be self-aware. And I feel like, I don't want to say that is like lacking across the board, but I think this gets back to sort of failure mindset and how subtle a lot of this stuff is. Like there is, and I think we had actually talked about this actually several times with Janessa, is basically holding up the mirror. Like our organization, like our only intent is to hold up the mirror in front of you and show you who you are to everyone else. And I'm not saying like you have to define yourself by how other people view you, but when you are talking about developing a team and you're talking about culture management, and you're talking about how to get people to work together, that is important. Like you have to be self-aware. And it not so much to the extent that you change who you are, but it's also like if you are in a position where you're not happy with personal life, you're not happy with whatever else, factors that there are, financial, health, whatever those stressors are in your life that are sort of adding to that survival state or survival mode, there has to be a willingness to look at yourself in the mirror. And if you don't have that, how are you ever supposed to actually get out of the failure mindset? And I think what becomes difficult is, again, subtly, if you have someone within your team who like defines themselves as being the victim. So it's always, how has this thing affected me? How has this thing negatively impacted my life? And I don't think that's, I don't think it should have us shy away from talking about those struggles that we're having. It's not that. It's how do you go into that conversation? Do you go into it noticing the barrier and wanting to collaborate, right? Because we're never going to be perfect. Or are you just going to use it to fuel the same failure mindset? Right? And I think the scariest part about collaboration, to be honest, is that when you talk about failure mindset, like especially if you have an individual who through most of their life they have identified as a victim, is that if, it's easy for those people to engage in communication that challenges purpose and well-being. So it's easy for them to engage in division. And there's actually, it's really intoxicating to be a part of divisive type behavior and discussion. It's gossip, right? So it's, last week we talked about the snitch loop, but part of it is also kind of birthed from why we just love gossip. Look at reality television. We just love that shit, and so if you have, again, culturally, we talk about are these PAW problems or these industry problems. Well, some of these actually just break out to being like
they're just cultural
society
problems.
And cultural problems. And people just enjoy that. But I think the hardest part to move out of the failure mindset is forgiveness.
Absolutely.
That I think is why when you brought that to the table several years ago, I didn't at that time. I understood it, but I didn't understand how it played and integrated so much into the growth mindset. That I think was really one of the big key indicators for me, is that there's absolutely no way you can implement solutions if you can't actually have the act of removing the emotion from an event, but maintaining accountability to it.
Right.
So if all you do is sort of have that emotional part constantly, well, I'm not saying that necessarily victims are highly emotional people, because you can have highly emotional people that are also creators, and of course creators are individuals that are focused on a desired outcome and purpose and intent. But when you sort of take that emotional behavior and it's so intoxicating to sort of engage in division, you're also not going to want to release that emotion, because there is sort of a release in your brain of like, oh, this is so good when I feel this way, and look at all the attention I'm getting for engaging in division, and look at all the people now who are talking to me and, not necessarily accepting, but just, engaging. And it's that sort of like, just positive feedback for a negative act. So we're feeding this negative act and it feels so good. Well, I don't want to get rid of that emotion. And that's why gossip is so awesome. I don't want to get rid of that, because look at all of this attention that I'm getting now. And I think, again, looking at forgiveness as being one of the linchpins to being able to implement solutions and plans. If you can't give up that emotion, it ain't never gonna happen.
So, you probably haven't read it, because
I don't read.
It's okay. So there's a book. So you are familiar with Simon Sinek, because we've talked about his stuff. One of his books, it's called Leaders Eat Last. And I skimmed it. I did not read all the stories and stuff in it. Generally, when I read books that are like that, I focus more on the core concepts than I do the tales that go around them. But in that book, and I don't remember the actual brain chemicals, so I apologize. There's because there's dopamine and serotonin and endorphins and all those, whatever, right?
Well, brain chemicals.
The one that you're referring to, because there is an actual biological effect in that mindset, is it's a dopamine hit. That's the same thing that happens when you do cocaine.
Yes, sure.
It's the exact same mental process, and it is absolutely intoxicating. And it's a self-fulfilling loop, because it feels good, therefore you want to do it more, but you get less and less every time. So you have to do it harder. It works the same as doing drugs. And you have to, the only way to beat it is essentially to focus on, I believe it's serotonin releasing mechanisms, which are creation and growth and improvement. Another way that you can do that is through endorphins. So that's why they say get your body right, because when you work out, it actually provides that same feeling, and it tends to actually be more intense than a dopamine hit does. And longer lasting.
Yeah, funny story. I was just talking to my personal trainer about that, literally today. I was like, I have to come. Everyone's like, how do you have time to go to the gym? I'm like, I have to go.
Right.
It's, and he was saying the same thing. He's like, you gotta get your health right, you got your body right. And it's the same thing. It's like, once you have this thing that you can commit to and focus on and just really give it your all, and part of my issue is that, I don't really have anyone who tells me what to do, for as much as I actually want it.
Did you hear that, Katie? Did you hear that?
Well, I mean, that's different. That's different.
That's funny though.
Yeah. But I'm saying, I don't, day to day, the buck stops here. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that sort of comes back that way, but yeah, anyway, not to interrupt, but yeah, it's good to know at least that. And that's what I liked about that book is, it's nice to know that there is science that backs it up, and it's not just the ramblings of two crazy guys in a map here, because it works too. I know for myself, I have a very, very well traveled path into failure mindset. I'm really, really good at it. I don't like to think that, and as I've become more aware of it, it's not to say that it doesn't happen. I can just notice the patterns more frequently, more readily. It's the getting out of it part that sucks, because
I'm a super high I person. I'm not conflict averse, but I like things to be happy.
Yeah, sure. That goes. Yeah.
It's kind of counterintuitive. I tend to be very back and forth on a lot of things.
Yeah.
But for me to go to break that cycle is pretty difficult, and I acknowledge that it's not easy for people to do that. At all.
Yeah.
And it's I would argue it's damn near impossible if you have no idea that it's happening.
Yeah, it's the subtlety.
Right. And that's when we were kind of developing this. I mean, how many times did we say it's time to throw the 2x4? Because what does the 2x4 do? It eliminates the subtlety.
Yeah, right.
It just throws it out there, and as much as it might hurt, sometimes that's what's necessary to eliminate the subtlety, because if you don't see it, you can't fix it, right?
Yeah. Well, no, and that as a perfect statement. Like, I mean, to talk about, why gossip is so intoxicating, like, I think the reason why I push so hard for people to move into the growth mindset is that is the curse of the problem solver. That like huge rush that you get when you actually do start to collaborate and you actually start to find solutions to problems that you can actually implement, and then it turns into a success.
Yeah.
Like, that is probably, I mean, I don't want to say it's one of the best highs, because there's definitely ways you can get that early. But as far as like, really having that just long-term, sustained sensation of fulfillment and long-term sustained feeling of purpose and intent. That's why we talk so much about growth mindset. And I think that's why I get so frustrated when I see people just stuck in this failure mindset and constant victimhood. And there's a part of me where it's like, I actually do feel sorry for them in the end.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what a person. And part of it turns down to what a waste. Some of these times it's like, some of these people, do you have any idea the amount of success that you could actually be tangibly taking part in if you're just willing to engage in the collaboration cycle? And a part of that, again, is just the act of forgiveness. And I'm not saying necessarily there's always going to be someone else that you have to forgive, but again, a part of it is forgiving yourself and forgiving others. And again, forgiveness is the act of removing emotion from the event without releasing the accountability. So it's just being like, what was it? I think Brianna, who was it? It was at least this weekend, but they were surprised at how easy it is for me to just brush things off. And we had I pulled a all stop this weekend. Actually, it was Brianna, because she had said that she found it actually really impressive that I pulled an all stop, and it's off the Toyota model, but the idea is that if things are not going the way that they should, anyone in the organization has the ability to hit the big red button and just halt everything. And basically, in probably about a half hour, I was able to reset everyone. And I'm not going to say I wasn't disappointed in the way that the clinic was being run at that time, and I made that very well clear to the people who were working at the time. But what Brianna had said was, she was like, but then it was over. Then it was like, oh, problem solved. Yep, we got everything back on track. She's like, you didn't stay mad for the whole rest of the shift and treat everyone like shit. And I was like, why would I? You
want to talk about going back to the scenario where I got to pull the all stop again. I'll stay mad and it'll go back to shit.
Right, exactly. And it's that's then kind of circling back to the I don't care. Like when I kicked it off to Molly, I was like, this needs to get done, this needs to get done, this needs to get done. I don't care what order it happens in. Yep. We just got to get that done over there. We got to get this done over here. Then we're going to jump back into triage. So that's where, for me, where it's like, people don't even necessarily have to ask for forgiveness. Like, I already have provided it to them, but there is a very deliberate action in having to request it.
Yeah.
And I think that again, and having to go through the actual forgiveness model, which is in our ERT, which I believe we actually have online under the PAWCast section, is actually seeing how you go through the forgiveness model is super fucking uncomfortable. Oh,
it's terrible. When I wrote that, I was like, oh my God. Yeah. This hurts. Like, it hurts to just think about.
Yeah.
Because it's not even, I shouldn't say it's painful. It's just painfully awkward.
Super awkward.
Because
terribly.
God, just to have to look someone else in the eye and ask, because it's like, that's as vulnerable as you can get, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because what happens if they say no?
Yeah, right.
It's not fun. And I think that's mostly what people are afraid of, and why we avoid it, and why it's so surprising when you can just, move past things. There's never a hesitation to say yes, especially when requested, but the fear of if somebody says no is so substantial, because I think we've all kind of been there. Like, to have sat in a room like that and know that you screwed up and like asked to like move past it, and the other person is just like, no, I'm just gonna stay mad, because they're of a failure mindset. They can't get past the subtleties.
Yes.
And that fear, and knowing culturally that we're pushing more and more. We're trained every day to push into the drama dynamic.
Absolutely.
That's what TV is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's daunting to put yourself out there like that, and I can at least empathize with those that, because I'm one of them, that have a very hard time just getting out and just doing it, because to break the seal is the hardest one. Once it rolls, then it's not as hard. Like, once the first one is done and you're able to develop that that system of safety, essentially, it becomes easier to be vulnerable, because you're not going to be as afraid of that pending no.
Absolutely.
But getting there sucks.
Yes.
And that's why we had to write it down.
To make an actual like objective path.
Like, I'm not going to look at you. I'm going to look at this paper, and I'm going to say the words, and hopefully that works the first time. And then next time I'll look up, and then I'm going to look down again and just be uncomfortable. And then the third time, maybe I'll know what to say.
Well, and that's, I think for us, what, they say the fear of no, you're exactly right. The fear of no is that if we were in an organization where if someone asked for forgiveness and the answer was going to be no, then we would put forgiveness over in the failure dynamic. It's a part of the path towards success. And again, I think, because Janessa often talks to me about, she's like, I don't have a problem with asking forgiveness from you, but I have a problem asking it from myself, and it's like, it's true. It is hard to kind of let things go, but like, and that's, again, for me, it's like just kind of brushing stuff off. And we'll see that it's, again, with, new technicians, certainly with our new doctors, as I think even coming out of veterinary school, there's a fear of your first death. It's like the first anesthetic patient to die, the first, hard thoracic trauma to die. It's like you have these things where it can really start to pull down, and I think what is very confusing to young practicing veterinarians is when you euthanize someone's animal and they thank you, there's like, they're already of the mindset that it's like, oh my God, I just did this horrible thing, and oh my God, they thanked me. And it's like, well, yeah, like that way it didn't have to suffer until its last breath and die a terrible end. So it's like, there's these different ways that we convince ourselves we are not worthy of forgiveness. And as soon as you kind of get past that idea where forgiveness is always available, and actually that reminds me, actually part of the onboarding with our 3 new doctors, I think that was actually part of the onboarding that I said, okay, we're just going to role play for a minute. We're going to pretend you kill something. The next thing is, I'm not mad about it, so let's just move past that. And like, I don't think they were expecting that for their onboarding, but you got to get it out there, because it's like, even to the end of, malpractice to, patient death or something, which has never happened in an organization, but it's just, you have to throw it out there to be like, if this does happen, you are no less of a person to me. We just need to say, just get, and that's as we move through through collaboration and creation, and just saying like, all right, I'm already just establishing reality for you. It's just, I'm acknowledging the reality that event may occur, and it's not going to affect, sort of our working relationship. I'm not going to allow you to be a victim. I'm not going to persecute you as a result of this, but you have to be willing to move through the collaboration process. And part of that process is forgiveness.
I think the part that kind of throws people off is, and I'm the same way, so this is not news to people, hopefully, but you have a great capacity to get very mad. That's not a bad thing, but we can acknowledge that as a reality, right?
Yes.
And so here's the thin line between these two scenarios, right? And that's why you especially, but why it's so important as a whole to focus so heavily on the blue parts. Because when you're mad and you're in the blue parts and you're of a growth mindset, it doesn't matter. Because why are you mad? You're mad because you're not actually in success.
Yes.
It's because you keep falling.
Yes.
That's where the anger is generated from, and what it fuels focus.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's category A. But category B is if anyone is a failure mindset and they see someone that's mad, it's not because of falling, it's because they're a victim.
Yes.
And that's why when you have a team of, I shouldn't say it, that's why the team tends to segment itself pretty easily. That's when we say when people offboard themselves, that tends to be why. Not because we're just so mad at them that they just know it's time for them to leave.
Correct.
But you got to get your head right.
Yeah.
And if you're in growth mindset, you can see emotions in general, sadness, fear, anxiety, anger, all of those as fuel to channel into more creation. Yeah. Because whether or not I'm so afraid of failing that I am just undying in my efforts to make things better, or I'm just so mad at the failure that I just realized, or the fall, right, that I'm not going to let it happen again. That mindset is way different than, oh shit, I just fell. Now I'm going to go hide in the corner so that when the person is mad, they don't actually yell at me.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So it's
weight as a definition.
Right. And that's the shitty part about emotions, and why I think that's why forgiveness becomes so substantial, because it's really, really hard to remove the emotional element, because here's another segmentation of ideas is we allow, because we're people, a first emotional reaction. Right. Like, you're allowed to be visceral.
Right.
In whatever way you gotta be. Yeah. Like, because if you try to choke that down, you're not gonna be genuine to yourself, and you're never going to be able to let it go. It's always just going to be like, you might choke it down, but that just means it's still in there.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you can blow it out, at the very least, you can rationalize it define it, and then be able to remove it. But you've got that. And if you're of growth mindset, it's like, okay, this is why this happened. Now we move on. But if you're a failure mindset and that's all you, or you choke it in, whatever it is, you can't get it out. You can't remove it. You can't get rid of that part. And it means you can never really be objective in the development of the solution. Yeah. It's, and
I think that's why actually when we have plans that we like basically have repeated fail implementation, it's because of that. It's because we're almost forcing growth onto someone who will never be out of a failure mindset. Yeah. You know, and that's where I think we are often tagged as being unrelenting. Yeah. We're just not going to stop. You know, and like, I would actually prefer on an individual basis, whether it's a one-to-one or in a group or whatever it is, like, I would actually be totally fine with someone just actually saying, I don't want to do that. I don't want to actually grow. I don't want to improve. You know, like saying like we have a plan. Like, I just don't want to do that. Why don't you want to do it? Because I just don't. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Yep. Thank you for not wasting my time. Yeah. You know, and that's where I think, you know, when you are sort of so then when you have a victim or you have someone of a failure mindset who's, you know, talking the talk, but they're not really walking the walk. And it's like, oh yeah, yep. Okay. Let's go through this. And yep. Oh, yep. I forgive you now, you know, and they're harboring ill will. They're harboring a lot of these things. Yep. And they're just kind of going through the motions, because that's what we do here, is just go through the motions emotions and there actually isn't any forgiveness, is it's just like you're wasting so much time. And I think administratively, I mean, that has absolutely happened to us over the years, and I think it still continues to happen, and it still will continue to happen, is that, you know, we're unrelenting, but a lot of it is on the word of the individual. You know, if they want to succeed and if they want to improve and they want to do better, we're going to be there for them all the way from beginning to end. You know, even if it takes long, like, you know, I would think, I mean, Janessa is a perfect example. I mean, she was like, you know, crank starting an old Model T, you know, I mean, like it was pretty hard to get her going, but then once she kind of gone, you know, kept going. And then I think what really started to get her is once she started to kind of feel that sort of success, maybe not necessarily success in case management, if that was changed one way or another, but it was a success like, oh, we did try this. And it's like, oh yeah, that did actually work. And crap, now we got like new employees here and they're kind of going through the stuff I went through, but like I got through that part and I'm so glad that I'm through that part now. And, you know, so that's a part of it too, is it's like, you know, none of this stuff is necessarily instant success. And I think that's, you know, even for us as administration or whatever is, you know, our main purpose is to support our employees any way that we can. And that's why we have our inverted org chart. But I think the thing that, again, that we're not susceptible to, or that we are susceptible to, is just creating policy, creating pathways. You know, like you said, like you said earlier, it's the experimentation part. We try this, we try that. This didn't work. That didn't work. And I think sometimes that does. If you have someone of a failure mindset, and they see, even if we're struggling administratively, we tried this policy, it didn't work. We tried this policy, it didn't work. We tried this policy, oh crap, it worked. Well, we're only at a 33%. You know, we tried 3 things and only 1 worked. And for us, it's like, well, we have one of those things that worked 33%, but it's going to work 100% of the time.
Right.
You know, so it's just part of that trial and error where there's, you know, you have to, if you are trying to change things within an organization, you like, and I think this kind of goes out to anyone who's in sort of a leadership position, is that like, you can't be held back by the fear of failure, even at the administrative level. You have to be able to try things. You have to be able to implement new plans, and eventually you're going to find one that hits. And if you have an employee group or, you know, coworkers, you know, people around you who are also of growth mindset, they're going to weather the storm. You know, they're going to go through it with you. They're going to allow this to work. They're going to allow that to not work. But if you have individuals within your team that have a failure mindset, they're going to be, well, they don't know what they're doing. They don't. This policy worked, and we tried it last time, and nothing has worked up to this point. And I'm just tired of all these different changes and these things, and nothing ever works. And it's like, no, we're actually finding the stuff that doesn't work because it gets us closer to the things that will. You know, and that's just medicine. That's just science.
I was going to say, that just sounds like when you have a diagnostic that comes back with a result that you weren't expecting.
Yes.
Like, I'm glad that we know what it isn't.
Yes. Right. Absolutely.
Like, it's how do you look at, and that's, I mean, just speaking with, and I'm actually curious if we can take it into a consultation room, right?
Oh,
like, because
absolutely.
we're talking big, right? Like, let's focus down in the way that we're communicating as people to people. Because if we're saying it's a cultural problem, I'm going to bet that over, you know, you've been doing this for 15 years. As the time has moved forward, the acceptance of a negative diagnostic has probably gotten less. Like, people just generally speaking are less in your necessity to talk through it in a way that makes it positive. It has become a longer talk path, and generally speaking, just more difficult.
Yes.
Because I expected an answer, not a non-answer. But if you turn a non-answer into an answer.
Well, and that's actually how I preface most of my diagnostics. Is I actually start out before the test is performed to prep them for a non-result, or one that doesn't necessarily further our understanding. When I, you know, talk to new vets or whoever, as I tell them, as you get 3 rule outs in 1 test, that's a big ratio for me, is that between history and physical examination, you should be able to hit down to 3 top possibilities on diseases, and you should assume that the people only have enough money to afford 1 test to differentiate those 3. So when I go into those consultations, and sometimes, I mean, that was kind of in the mid 2010s when I came up to that. So I was in the economic crisis. Now, of course, in our organization, we have a lot more financing options, and so we are doing more helping people with buying power and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's pretty much just having the conversation of like, all right, well, here's the tools that we have available to us. Blood work, urine, X-rays, hormone testing, send out in lab. Poke this, jab that, image this. Here's all of our tools, and it's a matter of what tools are we going to select to try to find our answer. And I say, I don't care who you are, but eventually you're going to stop using tools for diagnostic purposes, and you're going to start to use tools for treatment purposes. So it's a matter of trying to find that hybrid between what tests can we do, what tests should we do, and then when is that going to turn over to what treatments can we do and what treatments should we do. And you're exactly right. It's a longer talk path. It does take more time to get through that, but if you get through it on the front end, the back end is so much faster, because you have already provided value to your service before they've ever spent any money.
Right. Your value is not subject to the results. So now you take that, right, and now transplant it into essentially clinic or just business development. Your tools are your people resources, basically, or just whatever resources are in front of you. And if you're of a growth mindset, I think what it does is you've already prefaced the conversation to be accepting of a non-answer.
Yes.
I'm going to try this, and if it fails, I'm going to try something else.
Yes.
Because I know that doesn't work.
Yes.
But if I'm of a failure mindset, if it doesn't hit 100% and I don't see efficacy in a result right away. I'm just going to say, well, yeah, that's because it's terrible.
Yes.
Like, why would we try? It doesn't work.
Yes.
And it's the same as a urine test that comes back with not this thing that you were expecting.
Yes.
So, I mean, the reason that I wanted to do that is because the people that generally listen to this are probably going to be pretty attuned to conversations with the general public.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
It's just your scope got a little bit bigger, but we're still just people. We're still just talking, and we're still just trying to rationalize these positions to try to make stuff better.
Yes.
So I hope that serves as a good example.
I mean, it's
to illustrate.
I'd say it's a significant correlation.
I'm not. You're right. They're probably not exact. There's probably holes that people can poke in it for sure. And I'm happy to hear those, because if I get a non-answer, perfect, we're moving forward. But it like, if you think about it in terms of the acceptance of that non-answer and how am I going to deal with that if it happens, am I going to be able to forgive myself? And am I going to be able to refocus and try something else?
Yes.
And if the answer, or forgive the other person too, like maybe I'm testing out a process. Am I going to be able to forgive the person that used my time and did not realize the result that we were hoping for? If the answer to that is no, you're probably in most likely a subtle way of a failure mindset. And if you don't realize what is happening in your head, because it's mental first. And I should say, from personal experience, my head goes south long before my actions ever do. And then it starts to just bleed out, and then everyone's like, hey, Ben, you're being kind of an asshole. Oh, I wonder why. And thankfully, I have enough of a network of people that check me when I need it. But can you forgive that person? Can you forgive yourself? Can you refocus to creating something new to find the solution? Because I think most of the time we're still solutions focused, because we don't like to be in areas where we're basically realizing negatives all the time. But the question is, what's the solution? Is it dopamine or is it serotonin? I don't even know how to close this out. I do know that I have to be on the floor in 15 minutes. But that was a lot of stuff.
Like I said, we just figured we'd wing it, but
I feel like we winged it well.
I mean, it's been yoded. But I agree with you. I mean, I think that's kind of what the whole point of today was, at least for me, was to kind of not just focus on the snitch loop and not just focus on that, but really really try to focus and have people understand that a failure mindset it's so subtle. Yeah. It's so subtle. Yeah. And, I think honestly where we find it the quickest is when we do performance reviews, because usually people of a failure mindset rank themselves as all fives. It's like, yes. Is that generally speaking, it's just this like, so high on performance. Yeah. And of course our scale is PTW, it's a 5 scale. I don't think it's like a 50 scale, but yes, it's a 5 scale. Yeah. 5 being the highest, so it's, it's one of these where some of this stuff is so subtle. And, again, like I said, for us now kind of jumping into that 50 employee range it's really starting to become very easy to see trending and patterned behaviors, because we had so much exposure to it when we were 15, 20 employees. Yeah. We were able to kind of see that foundational work, but also see the foundational failures, where it was like, all right, we tried this process, it didn't work. We tried that process, it did work, but also not just process, but then also, okay, we have someone who is talking this way. Let's try to work with them to maintain integration within the team. So we had the opportunity of trying to take failure mindsets and turning them into growth mindsets, and having people who just naturally have a growth mindset to really develop those people and allow them to flourish. As I think now that we're starting to kind of more people, we have a better understanding of it. But I would say, and like I said, that was kind of the point of today, at least in my mind, was, for anyone, as we start to continue to move through our creating accountability diagram, is just recognize the subtlety. Yeah. Recognize the I don't cares, recognize who we're working for, recognize, a lot of these just ways in which we engage in divisive type conversations, and just know that it's there. And I think a lot of people know it's there, again, subtly, know it's there just under the radar, but might not know how to engage it. And I think that's where, again, engagement is almost exclusively in collaboration. Just provide the opportunity to improve performance and fulfillment. I mean, that's pretty much it. But yeah, I agree. I think that's a pretty good stopping point.
Yeah,
so,
it was for winging it, for walking into this with having no idea where it was going to go. Yeah. I feel like we just talked about some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty good stuff.
I hope it was helpful for those that are listening, watching, whatever that might be. Consuming. I think kind of moving forward, we'll start talking a little bit more about awareness, process, techniques, some sort of stuff like that. Star chart kind of goes into that as well, because a portion of that is, at least wrapping that up, is self-awareness, is being critical of where you're at.
That might be a good
variables.
One to tackle next.
Yeah. And then, it's a PAWCast. We'll see where it goes after that. So, hey, Carlo, you want to try a little less awkward of an outro?
Yeah, right. Okay, guys. All right, here we go. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.